And today we are going to start reading about the kingdoms and godheads of the mind. First the little mind, and then various higher levels of mind. So I will begin by reading about a page and a half, and then we'll go back to the beginning and look at each sentence in more detail. This paradise which 𝒊𝒈𝒂𝒕 has been in, the poet tells us, this now must be overpassed and left, as all must be until the highest is gained, in whom the world and self grow true and one. Till that is reached, our journeyings cannot cease. Always a nameless goal beckons beyond. Always ascends the zigzag of the gods, and upward points the spirit's climbing fire. The breath of 100-hued felicity and its pure heightened figure of time's joy, tossed upon waves of flawless happiness, hammered into single beats of ecstasy, this fraction of the spirit's integer, caught into a passionate greatness of extremes. This limited being, lifted to zenith bliss, happy to enjoy one touch of things supreme, packed into its sealed, small infinity, its endless time-made world outfacing time, a little output of God's vast delight. The moments stretched towards the eternal now, the hours discovered immortality, but satisfied with their sublime contents. On peaks they ceased, whose tops halfway to heaven pointed to an apex they could never mount, to a grandeur in whose air they could not live, inviting to their high and exquisite sphere, to their secure and fine extremities, this creature who hugs his limits to feel safe. These heights declined a greater adventure's call. A glory and sweetness of satisfied desire tied up the spirit to golden posts of bliss. It could not house the wideness of a soul which needed all infinity for its home. A memory soft as grass and faint as sleep, the beauty and call receding sank behind, like a sweet song heard fading far away upon the long, high road to timelessness. Above was an ardent, white tranquility. A musing spirit looked out on the worlds, and like a brilliant clambering of skies, passing through clarity to an unseen light, large, lucent realms of mind from stillness shone. Will you begin, Janaka? Page 238.
This too must now be overpassed and left, as all must be until the highest is gained, in whom the world and self grow true and one. Till that it's reached, our human cannot achieve.
So this too, this wonderful paradise of the life gods, where he has been so much healed by the atmosphere of bliss and delight, even this must now be overpassed, overtaken, and left behind. And the poet tells us that everything must be overpassed and left behind until the highest is gained, the highest level of possible experience. The highest with a capital H, as if the highest is a being. That highest one in whom everything, the world, the individual self, everything grows true and one, united. Until we reach that highest, our journeying cannot cease. Doesn't reach its end until the soul has passed through all possible levels of experience. And that is what Sri Aurobindo is describing for us in this part of the poem. All these wonderful levels, each of them, what kind of experience they offer to us. Alexander, would you read, please?
Always a nameless goal beckons. Always ascends the zigzag of the gods, and upward points the spirit's climbing fire. This breath of 100-hued felicity, and its pure, heightened figure of time's joy, tossed upon waves of flawless happiness, hammered into single beats of ecstasy. This fraction of the spirit's integer, poured into the passionate greatness of extremes, this limited being lifted to zenith bliss, happy to enjoy one touch of things supreme, packed into its still small infinity, its endless, time-made world outfacing time, a little output of God's vast delight.
Thank you. So Asvapati's journeying too has to continue until he reaches the highest. So he has to leave behind this paradise with its breath of 100-hued felicity, all its different shades and colors of happiness, of bliss. And the poet says, it's pure, heightened figure of time's joy, as if this paradise offers a kind of image, an intensified image of what the different kinds of joy that we can experience here in the world of time and space and individualization. That world is as if being tossed on a sea of perfect, flawless happiness, and as even if it's being compressed, hammered into single beats of ecstasy, moments of pure delight. This paradise, Sri Aurobindo tells us, is just a fraction, a tiny little portion of the wholeness, the integer of the spirit. But it has been caught into this passionate greatness of extremes. It has been lifted up to the very peaks of bliss. It is content. It's happy to enjoy one touch of things supreme. So it packs into it has a kind of infinity because of all the many different kinds of delight that it offers. But they're sealed, they're limited. It's a small infinity. It's a world, an endless world, but it's a world that's somehow been produced, made in time, and it's as if in its perfection it is outfacing time, defying time, saying even in time these enjoyments can happen. It offers only a little output of God's vast delight. That is why he has to pass beyond it. Alice, would you read, please?
The moments stretched towards the eternal now. The hours discovered immortality, but satisfied with their sublime contents, on peaks they ceased, whose tops halfway to heaven pointed to an apex they could never mount, to a grandeur in whose air they could not live.
So in that paradise, the moments are as if stretched out, as if promising the realization of an eternal moment of bliss. The hours pass, they are short-lived things, hours and moments. But these hours, because of that blissful felicity they offer, they discover what immortality is like. But that world is satisfied with its sublime contents. All this beauty and delight. It doesn't feel the need for anything more. So this world rises to a certain height, to peaks that are only halfway to heaven. They're not taking the full journey. they stop halfway. They are pointing to that highest heaven, to that highest which the soul should gain. But they're pointing to an apex, to a highest point which they could never actually reach. They're pointing to the existence of a grandeur, a greatness, in whose air this paradise cannot live. But the very fact that they exist, these heights invite the rising soul, the aspiring soul, to enter their high and exquisite sphere, their world, their atmosphere. It invites the soul to their secure and fine extremities. Security, they offer certainty, safety, and at the same time they are so fine, so subtle, so utterly delightful. They invite this creature, this earthly creature, to attempt to rise to them. But we are creatures who hug our limits in order to feel safe. We feel there's some danger in going too far and adventuring too high. So these heights, these halfway heights offered by the paradise of the life good, they are in a way refusing, they are declining the call of a greater adventure. That glory and sweetness of satisfied desire which they offer, it's as if it's tying up the spirit like an animal to a post. The posts are golden posts of bliss, but still they are restricting the movement of the soul. So those heights are not able to provide a home for the wideness of King Aswapati's soul. His soul now needs all infinity for its home. So as he has left all the other worlds, now he leaves this world and travels further. Will you read, please, dear?
A memory soft as grass and faint as sleep, the beauty and call receding sank behind, like a sweet song heard fading far away upon the long high road to timelessness. Above was an ardent white tranquility. A music spirit looked out on the worlds, and like a brilliant clambering of skies, passing through clarity to an unseen light, large, lucent realms of mind from stillness show.
All right, thank you. So this is the first mention of the realms of mind. As Aswapati soars higher, the memory of that lovely paradise stays with him, soft as grass, but it becomes fainter, faint as sleep. The beauty and the call of that paradise, they're getting further and further away. It's like some lovely music. As you move away from it, you hear it less and less clearly, because he is moving further on the long, high road to timelessness. This, although it is such a wonderful paradise, it is still a time-made world. So, as he goes higher, above, there's this ardent. Ardent means burning, intense, white, tranquility, peacefulness, no disturbance. From those heights, a musing spirit looked out on the worlds, musing. We could say thoughtful. It's not a very good equivalent. When we are musing, we're more than just thoughtful. We're deeply absorbed in inner concentration. So a spirit like that is looking out from that ardent white tranquility. And 𝒉𝒊𝒂𝒕 sees like a series of skies, one sky above another sky, going higher and higher, climbing up. Each of those skies passing through clarity to an even higher unseen light. Each of these levels represents a realm of mind. Each of them is large, lucent, full of light. Each of them is a realm of mind, shining out from the stillness, the ardent white tranquility of this atmosphere. So, of course, 𝒉𝒊𝒂𝒕 is going to have to explore this. But Sri Aurobindo says, but first, he had to explore something else.
This is a kind of 𝑉𝒂𝒂𝒕 mind level.
Sorry?
This is a kind of 𝑉𝒂𝒂𝒕 mind level, or?
It's definitely lucent, full. It has light, large and lucent. He sees those wide realms of light that are full, mind that are full of light, but first he has to see something else. Who's going to read next?
But first we meet the silver grey expanse, where day and night are driven and were one. In was a track of dim and shifting rays, parting like sentient flow to thoughts self-poise. The coalition of uncertainties, their
Exercised.
uneasy government on the ground reserved for doubt and reason this. The rendezvous of knowledge release ignorance.
Yes. So before he can explore those large, lucent minds, he has to pass through a different realm, which is kind of misty, a silver grey expanse, where day and night had wedded and were one. So a twilight world, a mixture of darkness and light. So that was a tract, an area, a territory where the light is not large and lucent. Instead, it's dim, faint light with shifting rays, like rays of sun coming through clouds and going away again and coming back. This tract, what it does, this intermediate level, is to separate the flow of life, the sentient flow of life, which lives very much through the senses, from the self-poise of thought, of the mind, the power of mind. So it's we will see as we follow 𝒉𝒊𝒂𝒕's journey further that he has to pass through many such transitional realms. So this is one which very definitively separates the flow of life from thought, from the realm of mind. So in this intermediate zone, it says a coalition of uncertainties exercised uneasy government. A coalition is when in a government and there are at least two parties who are not fully in agreement, but still they have to combine in order to govern. So, but these are all anyway uncertainties, no? So the government that they exercise is uneasy, unclear, unsure of itself, not steady and reliable, and that is based on a ground which is reserved, it's kept separately for the use of doubt and reasoned guess. Much of what we do when thinking is a kind of reasoned guess. No? We do the best we can to work out what looks most probable, but it's not really sure and certain. Dara.
At its low extremity, held difficult sway, and mind that hardly saw and slowly found. Its nature to our earthly nature close, and key to our precarious mortal soul, that looks from soul to sky, and sky to soul, but knows not the below, nor the beyond. It only sensed itself and outward things. This was the first means of our slow ascent from the half-conscious of the animal soul, living in a crowded press of shaped events, in a realm it cannot understand nor change, only sees and acts in a given scene, and feels and joys and sorrows around.
Thank you. So it's a realm where knowledge is mixed with ignorance. And especially at the lowest level of that realm, which is a mixture of knowledge and ignorance, at the lowest level of it, the lowest extremity of it, there's something that is really trying to control, but can't really manage it. Sway means rule, difficult sway. There's ruling a mind that can hardly see. It doesn't have any real power of vision and only finds things out very slowly. So that mind is very close to our earthly nature, our material nature. It's kin, it's closely related to our precarious mortal thought, our thought that is in the grip of ignorance and uncertainty. Our mortal thought, which we look from the ground to the sky and back again to the soil, but we don't know what is beyond those firmaments. It's not capable of knowing what is below, what is above. So this mind, which is described here, was the first means of our slow ascent, our slow development and evolution from the half-consciousness of the animal soul, which lives in a crowded press of shape events, in a realm it cannot understand nor change. If you live close to animals, you will know what problems they have to understand what's going on around them. Even with cats and dogs, it's like that, because they're living with these sensory experiences happening around them all the time. But how to interpret and understand it? It's in a realm it cannot understand, and it can't change things. I know my little cat would very much like to change many things, but she doesn't have the capacity to do that, and so she suffers. That animal soul sees and acts in the scene which it's been given. It doesn't have much choice at all. No? It does feel joy and sorrow for a little while, but only for a short time. So who's next? Will you read? Yes?
Only it sees and acts in a given state, and feels and joys and sorrows for a while. The ideas that drive the obscure embodied spirit along the roads of suffering and desire, in a world that struggles to discover truth, found here their power to be and nature force. Here are devised the form of an ignorant life that sees the empiric fact as settled down, labors for the hour and not for eternity, and trades its gain to meet the moment's call. The slow process of a material mind, which serves the body it should rule and use, and needs to lead upon an erring sense, was born in that luminous obscurity, advancing tardily from a limping star, crushing hypothesis on idea, throwing its theories as certitudes, its reasons from half-known to the unknown, ever constructing its frail house of thought, ever undoing the web that it has cut.
Thank you. So in this realm, separating life, the life levels, from those of mind proper, there's this mind that can hardly see, which slowly discovers things, which only senses itself, its own experience, and some outward things. This first struggling mind was the first means, the first efforts and a possibility for us human. We've become human beings, but first we had to pass through this stage. This slow ascent from the half-consciousness of the animal soul that's living in this crowded press of sense impressions in a realm it cannot understand nor change. It can't help it. It has to see, and it has to act, in a scene which is given to it. It does feel, it feels joy and sorrow for a while. But in that realm, the ideas that drive the obscure embodied spirit, the spirit that's developing in a physical body, it drives it to more and more experience. It drives it along the roads of suffering and desire in a world that's struggling to discover truth. So that in this that realm which 𝒊𝒈𝒕 is now seeing, that's in a way where they find their root, their origin, their power to be, and their nature force. In this realm, it says, here are devised the forms of an ignorant life. That lower level, the animal soul emerging from its animality towards something higher. That mind sees the empiric fact, what is practical, what seems to be real. It sees that not as something to be changed or developed or to be understood or worked on, but as settled law, that it has to be like that and it will always be like that. That mind is working just for the present moment. There's not a thought of laboring, working for eternity. And so whatever it feels it has gained, it's ready to throw away just in response to the call, the appeal of the moment. The slow process of the material mind, the mind that serves the body, the physical body, which it should eventually learn to rule and to use. The material mind needs to rely on the senses, but the senses are erring, they're not reliable, they can always make mistakes. So that slow process of the material mind was born in that obscurity, which is, however, a somewhat luminous obscurity. There's some light there. There's even some reasoning. Will you read? Did you read? Yeah. Lela, would you read?
Advancing towering from a limping star, crutching hypotheses and argument, throning its theories as certitudes, it reasons from the half-known to the unknown, ever constructing its frail house of thought, ever undoing the web that it has spun. A twilight sage whose shadow seems to himself, moving from
Minute.
to brief minute.
No, brief minute. From minute to minute.
To brief minute lives. A king dependent on his satellites, signs the degrees of ignorant ministers. A judge in half possession of his proofs. A voice, claimant of uncertainties, postulates. An architect of knowledge, not its source.
So that's this material mind. It slowly advances from a limping start. From the very beginning it is limping, it can't walk firmly. It needs a crutch. A hypothesis is a theory, a suggestion of how things might be, So it needs to support its hypothesis with arguments. This material mind, it develops theories of how things are, but it then says that its theories are certitudes. They really are like that. A theory normally is just a proposed idea. No? This material mind is reasoning from the half-known to the unknown. And so it's always rebuilding, he says, a frail house of thought, building up a mental structure for itself to live in, to feel safe in, to use as its base. But that consciousness is also always undoing the web that it has spun. Like a spider, it may weave a web in which it can catch things and feed from and use as a base, but at the same time it's always undoing them. It cannot have any long-lasting reliability. It's as if that mind is a kind of sage. It has a certain wisdom, but it's a twilight sage, half light. And his own shadow he takes for his real being. He moves from minute to minute. That's the way this consciousness lives. It is, in a way, a ruler of the being, but it's entirely dependent on all its servants and satellites. And it allows those who should be its servants and advisors to make decisions for it. He just signs whatever they tell him to. Or he's like a judge who has to take serious decisions in a court of law, but who hasn't really understood what the case is all about. He has a voice, quite a loud voice. He's ready to speak out and make assertions. He's quite clamant. But he's just speaking uncertainties. It might be like this. It might be like that. This being is an architect of knowledge, building things up from blocks and bricks. He cannot be the source of knowledge. We'll just go a little further. Would you like to read? Yeah.
This powerful born slave of his instruments thinks his low station nature's highest top, oblivious of a share in all things made, and haughtily humble in his own conceit, believes himself a spawn of matter's mud, and takes his own creations for his cause. For eternal light and knowledge meant to rise up from man's bare beginning is our climb. Out of earth's heady smallness we must break. We must search our nature with spiritual fire. An insect crawl renews our glorious flight. Our human state cradles the future God, our mortal frailty and immortal force.
Thank you. So, as very often happens, Sri Aurobindo gives us first the more negative, disappointing picture, and then he gives us his reassurance. So this being, this thinking being, he's a bond slave of his instruments, the senses and the sense organs. But still, he's powerful, though he doesn't know how powerful he is. But like many such people, he thinks that he knows everything. He thinks that this low station, is just the highest achievement of nature. Human beings tend to think like that, no? That, oh, we are the summit of creation. But we are oblivious. We're not aware of our share in everything that's made, in the whole creation. It's kind of contradictory. We may appear to be humble, but actually we are quite haughty, quite proud, especially when we look at ourselves. But at the same time, the common view is that we're the product, actually, of matter. We're children born of matter's mud. Actually, we have created so much, but we don't know that. We think that all these things are our cause. But in fact, the mental being is meant to rise to eternal light and knowledge. Our climb, we are supposed to climb, to rise up all the way from man's bare beginning in his most primitive state. We're meant to break out of the heavy smallness, the restrictions of matter, of material, physical living. We're supposed to search our whole nature with spiritual fire. We are meant to fly high, a glorious flight, but like a dragonfly or another insect, we prelude that glorious flight, we precede that glorious flight with an insect crawl. Our human state is a cradle for the future God. Our mortal frailty, all our weakness and vulnerability, contains the possibility of an immortal force, strength, power, potential. This too must now be overpassed and left, as all must be until the highest is gained, in whom the world and self grow true and one. Till that is reached, our journeying cannot cease. Always a nameless goal beckons beyond. Always ascends the zigzag of the gods, and upward points the spirit's climbing fire. This breath of 100-hued felicity, and its pure heightened figure of time's joy, tossed upon waves of flawless happiness, hammered into single beats of ecstasy. This fraction of the spirit's integer, caught into a passionate greatness of extremes. This limited being, lifted to zenith bliss, happy to enjoy one touch of things supreme, packed packed into its sealed small infinity, its endless time-made world outfacing time, a little output of God's vast delight. The moments stretched towards the eternal now, the hours discovered immortality, but satisfied with their sublime contents, on peaks they ceased, whose tops halfway to heaven pointed to an apex they could never mount, to a grandeur in whose air they could not live. Inviting to their high and exquisite sphere, to their secure and fine extremities, this creature who hugs his limits to feel safe. These heights declined a greater adventure's call, a glory and sweetness of satisfied desire tied up the spirit to golden posts of bliss. It could not house the wideness of a soul which needed all infinity for its home. A memory soft as grass and faint as sleep, the beauty and call receding sank behind, like a sweet song heard fading far away upon the long high road to timelessness. Above was an ardent white tranquility. A musing spirit looked out on the worlds, and like a brilliant clambering of skies, passing through clarity to an unseen light, large lucent realms of mind from stillness shone. But first he met a silver-grey expanse, where day and night had wedded and were one. It was a tract of dim and shifting rays, parting life's sentient flow from thought's self-poised. A coalition of uncertainties there exercised uneasy government on a ground reserved for doubt and reasoned guess, a rendezvous of knowledge with ignorance. At its low extremity held difficult sway a mind that hardly saw and slowly found. Its nature to our earthly nature close, and kin to our precarious mortal thought that looks from soil to sky and sky to soil, but knows not the below nor the beyond. It only sensed itself and outward things. This was the first means of our slow ascent from the half-conscience of the animal soul, living in a crowded press of shape events, in a realm it cannot understand nor change. Only it sees and acts in a given scene, and feels and joys and sorrows for a while. The ideas that drive the obscure embodied spirit along the roads of suffering and desire in a world that struggles to discover truth, found here their power to be and nature force. Here are devised the forms of an ignorant life that sees the empiric fact as settled law, labors for the hour and not for eternity, and trades its gains to meet the moment's call. The slow process of a material mind which serves the body it should rule and use, and needs to lean upon an erring sense, was born in that luminous obscurity. Advancing tardily from a limping start, crutching hypothesis on argument, throning its theories as certitudes, it reasons from the half-known to the unknown, ever constructing its frail house of thought, ever undoing the web that it has spun. A twilight sage, whose shadow seems to himself, moving from minute to brief minute lives. A king dependent on his satellites signs the decrees of ignorant ministers. A judge in half-possession of his proofs, a voice clamant of uncertainty's postulates, an architect of knowledge, not its source. This powerful bond-slave of his instruments thinks his low station nature's highest top, oblivious of his share in all things made, and haughtily humble in his own conceit, believes himself a spawn of matter's mud, and takes his own creations for his cause. to eternal light and knowledge meant to rise. Up from man's bare beginning is our climb. Out of earth's heavy smallness we must break. We must search our nature with spiritual fire. An insect crawl preludes our glorious flight. Our human state cradles the future God. Our mortal frailty, an immortal force.